In the summer of 1945, the United States built the core for a third atomic bomb, a warm, softball-sized sphere of plutonium that was never dropped on any city, and yet it killed all the same. Within 9 months, that 14-pound ball of metal ended the lives of 2 brilliant young scientists in 2 eerily similar accidents, one triggered by a dropped brick, the other by a slipped screwdriver, and it earned the name whispered around Los Alamos ever since, the Demon Core. This is a story about physics, but it is also a story about confidence, about what happens when some of the smartest people on Earth convince themselves that their bare hands are steady enough to hold back a chain reaction. Everything you are about to hear is documented. And almost none of it needed to happen. To understand the Demon Core, go back to July of 1945. In the New Mexico desert, the Manhattan Project detonated the first nuclear device in history, the Trinity test. 3 weeks later, a uranium bomb destroyed Hiroshima. 3 days after that, a plutonium bomb called Fat Man fell on Nagasaki. And in the laboratories of Los Alamos, a third core was already finished, 6.2 kilograms of plutonium gallium alloy, cast as a sphere roughly 3.5 inches across, sealed in a thin metal plating to keep the toxic material inside. If Japan had not surrendered, documents suggest that third bomb could have been ready for use by the end of August. But on August 15, Japan surrendered. The war was over. And the third core suddenly had nowhere to go. It stayed at Los Alamos, at a remote laboratory tucked into a canyon, the Omega site, where it was assigned to criticality experiments. The scientists who handled it noticed something quietly unsettling about the sphere. Because plutonium constantly decays, throwing off particles, it was warm to the touch. Alive, in a way metal should not be. Here is what criticality means, in plain terms. A mass of plutonium is always shedding neutrons. If enough of those neutrons strike other atoms and split them, releasing still more neutrons, you get a chain reaction. Below a certain threshold, the reaction fizzles out. That's subcritical. At the threshold, it sustains itself, critical. Beyond it, the reaction multiplies with explosive speed, supercritical. The Demon Core, sitting alone on a bench, was subcritical. Safe. But surrounded with a material that reflects escaping neutrons back inward, and you push it toward the edge. The Los Alamos experiments were designed to find exactly where that edge was, creeping toward criticality one increment at a time, listening to the neutron counters climb. Richard Feynman is usually credited with describing these experiments as tickling the tail of a sleeping dragon. The men who ran them adopted the phrase with a kind of gallows pride. Tickling the dragon's tail became routine, performed by hand, on open benches, with no shielding, no fail-safes, nothing between the experimenter and the sphere except skill and attention. The first man the dragon took was Harry Daghlian. Harry K. Daghlian Jr. was 24 years old, a physics prodigy from New London, Connecticut, the son of Armenian immigrants, recruited into the Manhattan Project while still a graduate student. On the night of August 21, 1945, 6 days after the surrender, Daghlian went back to the Omega site laboratory after dinner, alone. That was against the rules. Criticality work required at least 2 experimenters, and solo work after hours was forbidden. But the rules were treated casually in those weeks, and the only other person in the building was a security guard, Private Robert Hemmerly, sitting at a desk roughly 12 feet away, reading a newspaper. Daghlian was building a wall around the Demon Core, a stack of tungsten carbide bricks, each one a neutron reflector, each new layer nudging the sphere closer to critical. His instruments clicked faster with every brick. He worked steadily, layer by layer, until he was moving one of the last bricks over the top of the assembly, and the counters told him that this brick, set in place, would tip the core supercritical. So he began to withdraw it. And the brick slipped out of his hand. It landed directly on top of the assembly. The core went supercritical instantly, a burst of neutrons and gamma rays flooding the room, the air around the stack flickering with a pale blue glow. Daghlian reacted the way a human being reacts. He grabbed at the brick to knock it clear, and when that failed, he began tearing the stack apart by hand, brick by brick, until the reaction died. The whole response took him perhaps a minute. In that minute, he absorbed a radiation dose usually estimated at around 500 rem. Analyses differ on the exact figure, but every version of the number is lethal. His right hand, inches from the core, took vastly more. And here is the eerie part: at first, he felt almost nothing. A tingling in his fingers. He walked out of the building on his own legs. He was nauseous but calm and lucid when he reached the hospital. What followed took 25 days. Acute radiation syndrome does not kill like an injury, it kills like a schedule. First the sickness, then a deceptive recovery, doctors now call it the walking ghost phase, and then the collapse, as the body slowly discovers that its machinery for renewing itself, the marrow, the blood, the skin, has already been destroyed. Daghlian's burned hand failed day by day. His hair came out. His blood count sank towards zero. His mother and sister kept vigil beside him, inside a closed city that did not officially exist. On September 15, 1945, he slipped into a coma and died. The public was told a young scientist had died of chemical burns. The truth was still classified. Harry Daghlian became the first person in history killed by a criticality accident. Private Hemmerly, the guard across the room, received a much smaller dose and lived another 3 decades. He died of leukemia in 1978, at 62. Whether the accident caused it is genuinely debated, since his exposure was low, but Los Alamos veterans rarely tell this story without mentioning him. You would expect everything to change after Daghlian. On paper, it did. New rules required at least 2 people for criticality work, no solo experiments, no late-night sessions. But the hands-on culture itself survived untouched. The reflectors stayed on open benches, the confidence stayed in the room, and the demon core went back to work. Which brings us to Louis Slotin. Slotin was 35, a Canadian from the north end of Winnipeg, raised by refugees who had fled the pogroms of the Russian Empire. He held a doctorate in physical chemistry, wore cowboy boots and blue jeans in a laboratory full of shirt sleeves, and had a reputation as the coolest pair of hands in the building. Stories collected around him, that he had fought in the Spanish Civil War, that he had flown fighter planes. Biographers have found those tales mostly unverifiable, and Slotin, it seems, never worked very hard to deny them. But this much is verifiable: in July 1945, it was Slotin who assembled the core of the Trinity device, the first atomic bomb on Earth. Colleagues called him the chief armorer of the United States. His signature demonstration was the most dangerous routine at Los Alamos. The demon core sat nested in a beryllium half-shell, a neutron reflector far more efficient than tungsten brick. Slotin would lower a second beryllium hemisphere over the top, like closing a clamshell, taking the system to the very lip of criticality. Standard procedure called for shims, spacers that made it physically impossible for the shells to close completely. Slotin didn't use them. He held the top shell with one thumb hooked through a hole at its pole, and kept the 2 hemispheres apart with nothing but the flat blade of a screwdriver. Colleagues warned him about it. Enrico Fermi is said to have told him he would be dead within a year if he kept doing that experiment, a remark that reaches us secondhand and may be legend, but it captures exactly what the people around him were thinking. By May of 1946, Slotin was finished with Los Alamos. He wanted to return to research in biophysics, and the demonstration he ran on the afternoon of May 21 was partly a handover, training the man who would replace him, a physicist named Alvin Graves. 8 men were in the room at the Omega site that day. Graves stood just behind Slotin's shoulder, watching the technique he was about to inherit. At around 3:20 in the afternoon, Slotin lowered the top hemisphere, the screwdriver blade holding open a sliver of a gap. The blade slipped. The shell dropped shut. The core went supercritical, and every man in that room saw the air itself light up, a flash of blue, and felt a wave of heat cross their skin. Some later described a sour, metallic taste in their mouths. Slotin, in almost the same instant, wrenched the assembly apart, twisting his wrist and flipping the top shell off onto the floor. The burst lasted perhaps half a second. For him, it was already far too late. His body had been directly over the core, between the sphere and the men standing behind him. Whether that was deliberate shielding or simply the geometry of where he stood is honestly debated. But the men in that room, including Graves, believed for the rest of their lives that Slotin's body and his fast hands had saved them. What Slotin himself said, according to witnesses, was quiet, "Well, that does it." He got everyone outside, then had their positions marked on the floor so the doses could be reconstructed later. On the way to the hospital, he reportedly told Graves, "You'll come through all right, I haven't got a chance." He was right on both counts. Slotin had absorbed on the order of 1,000 rads of neutron and gamma radiation, far past any survivable line. The army flew his parents in from Winnipeg. Colleagues lined up to donate blood. For a few days he even seemed stable, and then the schedule asserted itself. On May 30, 1946, 9 days after the slip, Louis Slotin died. The same sphere, the same laboratory, the second dead man in 9 months. Los Alamos publicly honored his heroism, and the heroism was real. But the internal verdict was harsher: the accident was avoidable, the procedure violated the rules, and the screwdriver should never have been there. Both of those things are true at once, and that is exactly what makes this story so uncomfortable. Alvin Graves, the man behind Slotin's shoulder, survived acute radiation sickness, developed cataracts, and went on, remarkably, to direct American nuclear weapons tests. He died of a heart attack in 1965, how much his exposure contributed is still argued. And the core itself? It had been scheduled to travel to Bikini Atoll for the Operation Crossroads tests that summer. After the accident, its radioactivity needed time to die down, and it never made the trip. Instead, in the summer of 1946, the Demon Core was melted down, and its plutonium was recast into other weapon cores for the American stockpile. It was never destroyed, only dissolved. In a very real sense, the Demon Core did not disappear. It became part of other bombs. Its true legacy was a rule. After May 1946, hands-on criticality experiments were banned. From then on, such assemblies were operated by remote control, with the scientists roughly a quarter of a mile away, behind instruments. No one at an American laboratory has ever again died doing what Daghlian and Slotin did, by hand, at an open bench, inches from the edge. One mystery still gets argued about: the blue flash itself. It is often labeled Cherenkov radiation, but many physicists contend that what those men actually saw was the air fluorescing, nitrogen and oxygen ionized by the burst, glowing for an instant. Either way, the fact remains, the sphere announced itself with light. There was, of course, never a demon in the metal. Plutonium wants nothing. The demon lived in the culture, in the confidence of young men who had just built the most terrifying weapon in history at impossible speed, and who came to believe their own steady hands were a safety system. 2 small objects, a brick and a screwdriver, falling a few inches each, cost 2 of them everything, and changed the way the atomic age handled its own creations forever. If you want more forgotten history that sounds made up but isn't, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.